The Grand Council chamber of the Galactic Alliance buzzed with the usual mix of growls, clicks, and electronic translations. Massive beings of various shapes and sizes filled the room, most of them covered in natural armor, sharp claws, or enhanced battle suits. Among them, Tom Miller felt remarkably out of place in his simple diplomatic uniform. "The human speaks of negotiation again," rumbled Ambassador Krath, his stone-like skin crackling with disapproval, always hiding behind words when action is needed. Tom maintained his calm despite the familiar sting of these accusations. He stood at the podium, looking smaller than most species present, but his voice remained steady. "The border dispute between the Rock clans and the Storm Empire can be resolved without bloodshed. We have maps dating back centuries that could help establish." "Maps," interrupted General Dox of the Storm Empire, his electrical field crackling dangerously. "My people have lost warriors. We demand blood for blood, as is proper." The chamber erupted in approving roars. Tom noticed how the other representatives nodded and pounded their appendages in agreement. This was the way of the galaxy. Direct confrontation, immediate response to any challenge, and combat as the primary solution to all problems. Tom watched as his fellow human diplomat, Lisa Reed, documented everything from their corner of the chamber. They had seen this pattern repeat countless times since humanity joined the Galactic Alliance 50 years ago. Every species they'd encountered seemed to have evolved as apex predators, turning aggression into their primary diplomatic tool. "The human weight is weak," hissed Representative Mole, her scaled head swaying with disdain. "In my species, we settle disputes with ritual combat. Quick, clean, decisive. But humans..." She looked at Tom with all four of her eyes. "Humans always seek to delay, to talk, to find alternate solutions. Where is the honor in that?" Tom took a deep breath. "Honor comes in many forms," he said. "Sometimes it's found in preventing unnecessary death rather than causing it." This earned him mocking laughter from around the chamber. He was used to it by now. Humans were considered the cowards of the galaxy, the only species that actively avoided conflict when possible. Their evolutionary path as persistence hunters and tool users, rather than immediate predators, had shaped their approach to problems differently from every other known species. The session continued with the usual pattern. The Rock clans and Storm Empire representatives postured and threatened, each trying to prove their superiority through increasingly dramatic displays of aggression. Tom noticed how none of them mentioned the resources both sides actually wanted, or the civilian populations that would suffer in a war. Later, in the privacy of the human embassy, Tom sat with Lisa reviewing the day's events. The embassy itself reflected human nature, designed with multiple escape routes, defensive capabilities hidden behind a peaceful exterior, and plenty of room for diplomatic functions. "They're going to fight anyway, aren't they?" Lisa asked, looking through her notes. Tom nodded. "Probably. But our proposal is on record. When both sides have exhausted themselves and lost too many warriors to continue, they'll look for a face-saving way out. That's when they'll discover our suggested solution and implement it as if it was their idea all along. And we'll pretend we had nothing to do with it," Lisa added with a small smile. "Like always." "Like always," Tom agreed. "They call us cowards because we don't fight at the first provocation. They don't understand that our history is full of wars. We've just learned better ways to solve problems." The embassy's warning system suddenly flashed, indicating an approaching visitor. The door chimed, and a junior diplomat entered with an urgent message. Both Tom and Lisa recognized the look on his face. Something big was happening. "Sir, ma'am," he said, catching his breath. "Long-range sensors have detected something massive approaching Alliance space. The warrior races are already calling for a military response, but the readings are like nothing we've ever seen before." Tom and Lisa shared a knowing look. This might be the moment when the galaxy finally understood that there was more than one way to be brave, and that sometimes the most courageous action was choosing not to fight at all. The emergency session of the Galactic Alliance was different from any before. The usual posturing and threats were replaced by an uneasy silence as the holographic display showed the approaching anomaly, a massive dark mass that seemed to devour everything in its path. It's consumed 3 uninhabited systems already, reported Admiral Rex of the battle fleet, his metallic exoskeleton reflecting the red emergency lights. Our long-range scans show it's not a natural phenomenon. There's structure to it. Purpose. Tom Miller watched as the gathered representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. For the first time, he saw fear in species that had always boasted of their fearlessness. "Then we attack," roared General Dox, his electrical field now intensely bright with agitation. "The combined might of our fleets will crush this invader." The chamber erupted in agreement. Species that had been threatening to destroy each other days ago now called for unified action. Battle plans were drawn up immediately, with each race eager to prove their superior combat capabilities. "We should study it first," Tom suggested, standing up. "If we understand what we're facing." "Typical human cowardice," sneered Representative Mole. "While you study and hide, this thing devours more of our space. We are warriors. We fight." The combined fleet launched within hours, the largest military force ever assembled in the galaxy's history. Dreadnoughts, battlecruisers, and swarms of fighters gathered at the edge of the affected space. The warrior races were confident, their ships bristling with weapons that could shatter planets. Tom and Lisa watched from the human observation vessel stationed safely behind the fleet. Their own ships, few in number and lightly armed, had been mockingly relegated to support duties. "They're not even trying to communicate with it," Lisa said, shaking her head as she monitored the transmissions between alien ships. "Look at these readings. There's definitely some kind of pattern to its movement. It's not random destruction." The first wave of attacks began. Energy weapons powerful enough to crack moons lanced out at the dark mass. Missiles carrying payloads that could vaporize oceans streaked through space. The warrior races cheered as their weapons struck true. Then the cheering stopped. "No effect," Tom muttered, watching the sensor readings. "All that firepower, and they didn't even slow it down." The dark mass moved forward, unchanged by the assault. As it approached the fleet, ships began to lose power. The proud warrior races found their mighty weapons useless, their shields failing, their engines dying. "Fall back." The order came too late for many. Ships disappeared into the darkness, their crews' final transmissions filled with confusion and rage rather than fear. They didn't know how to handle an enemy they couldn't directly fight. Tom turned to Lisa. "Get me a channel to our science teams. All of them." While the warrior races retreated in disarray, he knew they needed to act fast and pull up everything we have on similar phenomena from Earth's deep space observations. The human observation vessel's crew worked quietly and efficiently, gathering data while the military forces of the galaxy regrouped. They watched as the warrior races prepared for another assault, bringing in even bigger weapons, planning to throw more ships and lives at the problem. "Sir," one of the sensor operators called out, "we're detecting something strange. The energy pattern of that thing. It reminds me of something I studied in xenobiology, about how some deep-sea creatures on Earth navigate." Tom moved to look at the readings himself. "Send this to all our research stations. I want every human scientist working on this." He turned to Lisa. "They think we're cowards because we're gathering data instead of attacking. But if this thing is what I think it is." The observation deck fell quiet as another wave of alien ships moved to engage the threat. Tom watched them, wondering how many would survive this time. The warrior races were brave. He had to admit that, but bravery without wisdom was just another word for suicide. "The rest of the galaxy sees an unstoppable enemy," he said quietly. "But we might be looking at something very different. The question is, will they listen to us before it's too late?" Behind him, the darkness continued its advance, unfazed by the galaxy's mightiest weapons, while human scientists worked frantically to understand what no one else had bothered to study. 3 days after the Second Fleet's destruction, Tom stood before the Galactic Council again. The chamber was less crowded now. Many representatives had left to join their species' war efforts. Those who remained looked haggard, their usual aggression dampened by consecutive defeats. The combined fleets have lost over 2,000 ships, Admiral Rex reported, his metallic voice lacking its usual confidence. Our strongest weapons are useless. The Void, as we're calling it, continues to advance. Tom cleared his throat. The Human Science Division has completed their initial analysis. He activated a holographic display, showing complex data patterns. We don't believe this is an attack at all. Not an attack. General Dox's electrical field sparked with anger. It destroyed our most powerful ships. No, Tom replied calmly. It absorbed them. There's a difference. He adjusted the display. We've detected regular patterns in its energy field. It's not random, and it's not aggressive. It's following something, like a migration path. The chamber erupted in dismissive growls and hisses. Representative Mole rose from her seat. All four eyes narrowed. More human nonsense. While you play with numbers, it devours our territory. The territory it's devouring follows a straight line, Lisa added, standing beside Tom. If you plot its course, it's following the exact path of an ancient radiation stream from when this galaxy was young. We think it's feeding off residual energy, like a massive space-dwelling creature following an old feeding route. The council chamber grew quiet as the implications sank in. Admiral Rex leaned forward. You're saying we've been attacking an animal? A highly evolved space-dwelling entity, Tom corrected. Our weapons don't hurt it because it exists partially in another dimension. That's why it seems to absorb matter and energy. It's actually shifting them slightly out of our reality. And how does this help us? Demanded General Dox. Knowing what it is doesn't stop it from destroying everything in its path. Tom smiled slightly. Actually, it does. If we understand what it is, we can predict its behavior. More importantly, we can guide it. He brought up a new set of diagrams. We've designed a way to create artificial radiation streams, like laying down a trail of food to lead an animal away from populated areas. The council chamber buzzed with mixed reactions. The warrior races struggled with the concept of solving a problem without violence. The idea of redirecting rather than destroying seemed alien to them. This is your plan? Representative Mole asked incredulously. To feed it, like some kind of pet. It's not a pet, Lisa explained patiently. It's a magnificent creature that's probably existed since the galaxy was young. And yes, we plan to give it an easier path to follow, one that doesn't go through populated systems. Tom watched as the council members discussed among themselves. He could see the conflict in their expressions, their instinct to fight warring with the undeniable failure of that approach. The technology is ready, he added. We can deploy the radiation generators immediately. All we need is your permission to proceed. Permission? Admiral Rex's metallic laugh was harsh. You humans, even now, you ask for permission instead of taking action. Yes, Tom said firmly. Because we're not just trying to save lives, we're trying to show there's a better way. Violence isn't always the answer. Sometimes understanding is stronger than any weapon. The council chamber fell silent. Tom could see them struggling with their pride, with generations of solving problems through combat. Finally, Admiral Rex spoke again. Deploy your devices, human. We have nothing left to lose. As Tom and Lisa left the chamber, she turned to him. They still think we're cowards, don't they? Probably, he agreed. But maybe they're starting to understand that there's more than one kind of courage. It takes bravery to fight, but it takes even more bravery to stop fighting and try something new. Behind them, the human scientific teams were already mobilizing, preparing to launch the largest coordinated peaceful response in galactic history. While the warrior races watched from their battered ships, humanity prepared to save the galaxy not with weapons, but with wisdom. The human research station Horizon buzzed with activity. Scientists and engineers moved with quiet efficiency, their work illuminated by the soft glow of holographic displays, showing the void's steady advance across space. "The radiation generators are ready," Dr. James reported to Tom and Lisa, his tired eyes reflecting the countless hours spent perfecting the technology. "We've modified them based on the void's recent behavior patterns." The main laboratory was filled with devices that looked deceptively simple, silver cylinders containing complex machinery that could manipulate space-time itself. Hundreds of them lined the walls, each one representing humanity's alternative to brute force. "How sure are we about this?" Lisa asked, examining one of the generators. "If we're wrong." "We're not wrong," Dr. James replied firmly. "Look at this." He brought up a new display showing energy patterns. "We've been running small-scale tests. The void responds exactly as predicted. It's attracted to the artificial radiation streams just like we theorized." Tom watched as the Warrior race's remaining ships maintained their safe distance from the research station. They had granted humans the permission to try their plan, but their disdain was clear in every communication. "Forward observation post reports the void will reach the test area in 6 hours," a young technician announced. "All generator platforms are in position." The plan was both simple and incredibly complex. They would create a massive artificial radiation stream, stronger than the ancient one the void was following, and curve it away from populated space, like laying down a trail of breadcrumbs, but with dimensional energy instead of bread. "Representatives from the council are demanding to observe the deployment," Lisa said, checking her communications. "They don't trust us to do this alone." Tom nodded. "Let them come. Maybe watching us work will help them understand." Hours later, the observation deck was crowded with alien diplomats and military leaders. Their massive forms and battle armor looked out of place among the clean lines of human scientific equipment. "Such tiny devices," General Dox commented, his electrical field crackling with skepticism. "How can these stop what our mightiest weapons could not?" "They're not meant to stop it," Dr. James explained patiently. "They're meant to communicate with it, to show it a better path." The deployment began. Automated platforms moved into position, each carrying multiple generators. As they activated, streams of exotic radiation began to flow through space, invisible to the naked eye, but blazing on their instruments. "Energy flow stable," reported a technician. "Creating the artificial stream now." The alien observers watched in silence as humans worked. There were no battle cries, no weapons charging, no displays of force. Just careful, precise movements and constant monitoring of data. "The void is approaching the test area," Lisa announced. "First contact with the artificial stream in 3, 2, 1. Everyone held their breath as the massive dark entity reached the point where their artificial radiation stream intersected its path. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, slowly, impossibly, the void began to turn. "It's working," Dr. James whispered. Then louder, "It's working. The void is following our stream." The observation deck erupted in surprised murmurs. The warrior races watched in disbelief as the unstoppable force that had destroyed their most powerful weapons gently curved away from its original course, following the path humans had laid out for it. "How?" Representative Mole asked, all 4 eyes wide. "How did you know this would work?" "Because we chose to understand instead of attack," Tom replied. "Sometimes the greatest power comes from knowledge, not force." As they watched the void follow its new path, Lisa turned to Tom. "They still might not understand. To them, this probably looks like trickery or deception." "Maybe," Tom agreed, "but they can't deny the results. And maybe, just maybe, some of them will begin to see that courage isn't just about fighting. Sometimes it's about having the patience to find a better way." The Human Research Station continued its work, monitoring and adjusting the radiation streams, guiding the ancient cosmic entity safely through space, and in doing so, they were showing the galaxy a new kind of strength, one that came not from the ability to destroy, but from the wisdom to preserve. The success was short-lived. 3 days after the void began following the artificial radiation stream, something went terribly wrong. The massive entity suddenly split into 2, then 4, then 8 smaller versions of itself. Multiple signatures detected. The human monitoring station's alarms blared as the situation deteriorated. The void is reproducing. Tom and Lisa rushed to the control center where Dr. James was frantically analyzing data. The holographic displays showed the smaller voids spreading out in different directions, each one still capable of absorbing matter and energy. It's a natural reproductive cycle, Dr. James explained, his voice tight with concern. The radiation stream we created must have triggered it, like salmon returning to spawning grounds. In the following hours, the warrior races reacted as they always did, with force. Despite their previous failures, they launched a massive coordinated attack against the multiple voids. All ships, engage. Admiral Rex's command echoed through space. Show these creatures the true might of our combined forces. Tom watched from the human research station as the galaxy's most powerful fleet split into battle groups, each targeting a different void. Their weapons, now upgraded and modified, lit up space with destructive energy. But the result was the same. Worse, even. The voids are responding to the attacks, Lisa reported, monitoring the sensor feeds. They're becoming more erratic, more aggressive. The energy absorption is accelerating. One by one, the mighty warships of the galaxy's warrior races disappeared into the darkness. Proud battle cruisers, generations old, vanished without a trace. The greatest weapons ever created proved useless against an enemy that existed partially in another dimension. The Storm Empire's fleet is gone, reported a technician. The rock clans are in full retreat. The metal-collected ships are losing power. In the council chamber, hastily convened via holographic projection, the once proud representatives of the warrior races looked broken. Their armor seemed duller, their postures less aggressive. Everything we've tried has failed, Admiral Rex admitted, his metallic voice carrying an unfamiliar tone. Despair. Our strongest weapons, our bravest warriors, our most advanced technology, all useless. We should have listened to the humans earlier, Representative Maul said quietly, all 4 eyes downcast. Their way. Maybe it wasn't cowardice after all. Tom stepped forward, his mind racing with possibilities. It's not too late, he said. We learned something from each attempt. The voids react to energy, not just radiation, but emotional energy too. The more aggressive the response, the more erratic they become. What are you suggesting? General Dox asked, his electrical field barely flickering. A complete change in approach, Tom replied. No more attacks. No more attempts to destroy or control. Instead, we work with their natural patterns. We create a network of radiation streams, like a road system for them to follow. And what of our territories? Someone demanded. Our worlds. We map safe corridors, Lisa added, bringing up a display of the galaxy. We guide them around populated areas. Yes, we'll lose some systems, but we'll save most of our civilizations. The council chamber fell silent. The warrior races, who had solved every problem with combat for countless generations, faced a moment of truth. Their way had failed. Their strength had proved meaningless. All that remained was to try something new. The humans have my support, Admiral Rex said finally. We've tried everything else. Let them try their way. One by one, the representatives agreed, not with enthusiasm, but with the quiet resignation of those who had run out of options. As the meeting ended, Lisa turned to Tom. They're only agreeing because they're desperate, she said, not because they understand. Understanding can come later, Tom replied, watching the displays where the voids continued their dance through space. Right now, we need to save lives. And maybe, just maybe, we can show them that there's more than one kind of strength. The human research teams began their work anew, not with weapons or shields, but with knowledge and patience. In the darkness of space, the voids continued to move, waiting to see if humanity's wisdom could succeed where the galaxies might have failed. Human research stations formed a vast network across threatened space, each one coordinating with the others in perfect synchronization. The warrior races watched from a safe distance as humanity implemented their plan, not with weapons, but with carefully calculated streams of radiation and energy. Network initialization complete, Dr. James announced from the main control center. All stations report ready. Tom and Lisa stood at the central command post, surrounded by holographic displays showing the positions of all 8 voids. The entities had been growing more erratic, their movements becoming increasingly unpredictable. Begin Phase 1, Tom ordered. Activate the primary radiation streams. Across space, hundreds of generators hummed to life. They created intricate patterns of energy, weaving a complex web of artificial pathways. Each string was carefully calibrated to match the original ancient radiation the void had been following. The nearest entity is responding, Lisa reported, watching the readings. It's altering course to follow our stream. One by one, the voids began to react to the human-made paths. Like rivers flowing through space, the radiation streams guided the entities away from populated systems. It wasn't a perfect solution. Some outer colonies had to be evacuated, some mining operations abandoned, but it was working. Look at this, Dr. James called out suddenly. The voids, they're synchronizing their movements, following some kind of pattern. The warrior race's representatives, watching via holographic projection, saw it too. The 8 voids were no longer moving randomly. Instead, they were forming a complex dance through space, following the human-made streams in an almost beautiful display. They're not just following the radiation, Tom realized. They're communicating with each other through it. Our streams didn't just create paths, they created a network they can use to coordinate. The observation was proven correct as the voids began moving in perfect harmony, their paths interweaving without ever intersecting. The human network of radiation streams had become more than just a guidance system. It was a form of language. Energy levels are stabilizing, Lisa reported. They're becoming less erratic. The absorption rate is dropping to minimal levels. In the council chamber, the warrior races watched in stunned silence. Their mighty weapons had failed, their brave warriors had fallen, but here were the cowardly humans, solving the crisis with science and understanding. We're receiving unusual readings from the voids, a technician announced. They're starting to merge back together. The process was gradual but unmistakable. Following the human-made paths, the 8 entities began a complex dance that brought them closer together. When they touched, instead of chaos, there was harmony. Slowly, they recombined into a single, stable entity. Containment achieved, Dr. James announced, his voice filled with quiet pride. The void is following our designated safe path out of populated space. The victory, when it came, was anticlimactic by warrior race standards. There were no explosions, no last-minute heroics, no glorious battles. Instead, there was simply the quiet satisfaction of a problem solved through patience and understanding. This is how humans fight, General Dox asked, his electrical field flickering with confusion. By not fighting. This is how we solve problems, Tom corrected gently. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is step back and think instead of attacking. The warrior races struggled to understand this concept. Their entire cultures were built around combat and direct confrontation, but they couldn't deny the results. The human way had succeeded where their methods had catastrophically failed. As the void peacefully followed its new path out of populated space, Lisa turned to Tom. Do you think they'll remember this, or will they go back to calling us cowards as soon as the crisis is over? Tom watched the holographic displays, showing the massive entity now moving harmoniously through the human-made network of energy strings. Some will remember, he said. And maybe, just maybe, the next time there's a crisis, they'll think twice before reaching for their weapons. The human research stations continued their work, maintaining the network of radiation streams, ensuring the safe passage of an entity they had chosen to understand rather than destroy. In doing so, they had shown the galaxy that true strength sometimes comes in the most unexpected forms. 1 month after the Void Crisis, the Galactic Alliance gathered for a historic session. The Grand Council chamber felt different now. The usual aggressive posturing was replaced by a more thoughtful atmosphere. Admiral Rex stood at the center of the chamber, his metallic form somehow less imposing than before. The human radiation network remains active, guiding the void safely through uninhabited space. Our scientists have begun studying their methods. What these humans achieved, Representative Mole added, her 4 eyes showing unusual respect, was not cowardice as we thought. It was something else entirely. Tom and Lisa sat in their usual spots, but the looks they received were no longer filled with scorn. The warrior races had been forced to confront a truth they had long ignored, that there were different kinds of strength, different forms of courage. The Galactic Alliance has existed for millennia. General Doc spoke, his electrical field pulsing steadily. In all that time, we believed that direct confrontation was the only path to victory. We were wrong. The chamber murmured in agreement, something that would have been unthinkable just weeks ago. The warrior races, proud and ancient, were learning to adapt. Our preliminary studies of human history have been enlightening, Admiral Rex continued. Their species has fought countless wars, yes, but they've also solved many crises without violence. They've faced extinction-level events and survived not through superior firepower, but through innovation and cooperation. Tom stood to address the chamber. What you saw wasn't unique to this crisis, he explained. Humans have always looked for alternative solutions. We've learned, through our own bloody history, that the strongest warrior isn't always the one who strikes the hardest. The council chamber displayed holographic images of the void following its new path, peacefully traversing the radiation network. The very entity that had humbled the galaxy's mightiest forces now served as a testament to a different kind of victory. The Galactic Alliance is implementing new protocols, announced the High Council leader. All future crises will be analyzed for non-combat solutions before military action is authorized. And, he paused significantly, we are establishing a new division, the Strategic Innovation Corps, to be led by human advisors. Lisa leaned over to Tom. They're actually going to let us teach them our methods. They're learning, Tom replied quietly. Change won't happen overnight, but it's starting. The session continued with various races sharing their experiences from the crisis. Many spoke of how they had initially dismissed the human approach as cowardice, only to witness its effectiveness firsthand. Our species have always evolved as warriors, Representative Mull observed. We saw humans as weak because they didn't share our aggressive instincts, but now we understand. They evolved as problem solvers. Their caution isn't fear, it's wisdom. As the session concluded, the chamber felt more united than ever before. The warrior races were beginning to understand that true strength came in many forms, and that sometimes the bravest action was choosing not to fight. Outside the chamber, Tom and Lisa watched the sunset over the capital city. The skyline was filled with ships from various species, no longer arranged in battle formations, but peacefully coexisting. Do you think it will last? Lisa asked. This new understanding. Tom thought about it. Some will resist change. Some will cling to the old ways. But we've shown them something important, that there's more than one path to victory, more than one type of courage. The human research stations continued their work, monitoring the void's peaceful journey through space. But now they were joined by scientists from other races, eager to learn, to understand, to find new ways of solving problems. The galaxy was changing, slowly but surely. The species that had once mockingly called humans cowards were beginning to see that courage wasn't just about facing danger. It was about having the wisdom to know when not to fight, the patience to find better solutions, and the strength to choose peace when possible. And in the vast darkness of space, the void continued its journey, guided by human innovation, a living testament to the power of understanding over force, of wisdom over weapons, of the courage to think differently.